Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the session. We are obviously having some problems with people joining us. I see that more people are joining us, but it's taking a bit of time. I think the weather and load shedding probably has a contributing factor to that. So let's just give it 5 minutes. So we're planning to start at 9:05. My apologies for everyone who's already joined us and have to wait, but in the interest of just giving as many people as possible a chance to join us, let's start at 9:05. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the session this morning on a cold winter's morning from Gauteng. I'm Charene Nortier, and I'm from the Conduct of Business Supervision Division at the FSCA. With me on the screen is Juanita Smit, and I'm going to be introducing her a little bit later in more detail. Today's session on the Omni CBR is about cooperatives, cooperative banks, and cooperative financial institutions. So I am hoping that we will be very cooperative during today's discussions. We are very pleased to have you here. We are looking forward to an interesting and hopefully invigorating discussion about the introduction of the Omni CBR and what is going to happen in the future. We are also going to be talking about the timelines a little bit, just to remind everyone of this. So in today's discussion, the floor is really open to the audience. The purpose of today's discussion is for you as the industry to have a discussion about the proposals that we have drafted, that we have made available to you, to talk to us about the things that you like. Hopefully there's a lot of that, and also to give us some suggestions for improvement. We really are open for suggestions for improvement. We want this to work for you at the end of the day, and Juanita is definitely going to be talking about that as well. We also, from our micro institutions department, which is also tasked with looking after all of the various cooperative institutions in the industry, have Jacky Huma, who is the head of department, and her colleagues, Lehlogonolo, Chuenyene, Sitwell Francis, and some of the other colleagues here as well. My apologies if I miss your names. Looking at the name list, I see that we have quite a few attendees already, so welcome everyone. We have a wide variety of people from the FSCA willing to help with any questions that may come their way. And then we obviously have people from the industry, and we hope that you've come prepared. So, Juanita, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Charene, and good morning, everyone. So as Charene said, I'm Juanita Smit. I'm actually a manager in the Conduct of Business Supervision Division, where we specifically look at insurers and 13B administrators. But I was also responsible for the team that worked on the Omni CBR. And the reason why I'm doing the introduction kind of today is because Jacky's voice, unfortunately, has left her, or left the building to say. So I will be standing in for Jacky. But don't fear, because all the experts of the department is here, and if Jacky needs to answer anything, she'll be able to type her answer in the comments for us, the same as any of you. So basically, we know, so firstly, we do apologize in the communication. We did speak of cooperative institutions and not just cooperative intermediaries and cooperative banks. And we are aware that this workshop is for both, and we're very aware of the difference between both as well. And we are very glad to see that so many representatives from the industry is attending the workshop. We're also aware of the fact that this is a very new concept, this return. It is a conduct of business return. So although there might be some prudential indicators that we're asking for, it's really for us to understand the conduct of business of an entity, to see how it all relates, to see what is the fair outcome to the customer that you have. And this return is really rolling out to all the, as you saw in our communication and our roadmap, to all the institutions that we supervise in conduct of business supervision. And then later on, we wanted to roll out even further to other entities. So it is a cross-sectoral return, which is also a first for us. We've done a conduct of business return for the insurance industry, and we rolled that out, and they have been reporting on it for the last 4 years. We've learned a lot from that experience. You'll also see in the roadmap, we refer to the fact that we did a lot of consultation in the last 2 years to try and develop this return. We believe we have a good product here, but we also know that we need industry to work with us to make sure that the risks that we know exist in the industry, that we also write indicators to track those risks. Now, we're very aware that the different industries have a different level of maturity when it comes to data and having data ready and available. And that is why you'll see there's quite a difference in the level of a return that we ask for a co-op versus what we ask for a traditional bank, what we ask for a financial advisor or an insurer. Because we want this to be an entry level type of return. This is a new return that you'll be having. And therefore it is a lighter version of the return. Now, the return feeds into the strategy that we as the FSCA have of being more intrusive, of being more proactive, because some of the indicators we can also then use later on when we have more maturity on the data about doing some predictive analysis on it, trying to protect the industry and the customers. It's also there to give us information about financial inclusion, the level of financial inclusion when it comes to the customers. And that's why you'll see we also ask the customer segmentation into, on the retail side, the age levels, with some assumptions saying that if you're at a certain age, you need a certain type of product, or you have a certain type of need, or you have a certain level of experience when it comes to these products. That would influence the type of distribution channel that needs to be used, that will influence the type of advertising that we'll use. And we want to make sure that all customers of an entity is treated the same. So it will help us to be that more proactive in that sense, but it's also a bit uncomfortable. And we know that when you look at it, you're thinking, this is a lot of information that we're asking, even if we say this is a lighter return, but we are more intrusive. And this is an off-site monitoring tool that we're using in the bigger framework, supervisory framework for our supervision. So it's not the only tool that we're going to use. It's not the only way of engaging you. It's only there to flag certain areas so that when we do engage you, we have the focus areas that we need to do the engagement on. So that is important. And also, hopefully, by the end of this session, and we're more than willing to go very slowly through the session because it is a new return and it is a new concept, to also explain to you the thinking behind the questions. We're also more than willing to have individual sessions before written comments are due on the 10th of August to explain the thinking behind it. We also have the webinar, and I'll ask Charene to also just put the links for the webinar for us in the chat area. So if you haven't watched it, that you have the opportunity to watch it, because I think when you realize why we're asking it, and that's why I'm saying it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's about us being a little bit more intrusive, but it's giving us only the information that we need and that we use to supervise you effectively in terms of market conduct. We have really tried to ensure that there's no duplication of information. So if you feel there is a duplication, do ask us about it, and we can explain to you why it's at a different level. So you might be giving certain information on other statements somewhere else, or even to us, and we'll explain to you why we need it at this level and what is the market conduct indicator we're using at this level. So we really, in this discussion, as Charene said, really want to get feedback from you. The thing about it's going to cost money to implement because not everyone has systems. That is true. It's going to cost us a lot of money too to get the systems to really work with the information. We want to use it for benchmarking. We want to give you feedback so that you also know where you are, how can you service your customers better. We want to understand the obstacles that you're facing better and try and give you some guidance into how to deal with that. Because part of our mandate is also, it's not just to be a regulator in terms of trying to supervise entities and when you go wrong, then to do enforcement, but it's also to be a partner with you. And we want to show you the value of this return for your business. So if you implement it, and the bigger companies in the insurance industry kicked against it tremendously. It took us long to implement it with them. They also had a transitional period of 3 years before they started reporting. But now the bigger ones are actually seeing the value in it and actually using it as their own report on a monthly basis. So that is the value that we want to show you today and the thinking behind it. Also, when we do talk about the concerns about how to submit it and how to get the data, because we do realize that is a big concern, especially in this industry. We have two ways of submitting. The one is a more sophisticated way for the bigger entities where they do it with XML and it's a automatic upload. But we also have that you can actually fill it in on a web-based form, which is on our web portal, and that you can complete it there, and that you can go in and out and in and out and use the entire month, because it eventually is going to be quarterly. We might in the beginning say it's more biannual to get you into that level of reporting, and then it's going to be quarterly, and we work with calendar quarters, and you're going to submit it at the end of the month after the calendar quarter ended. So then you can go in and out and in and out and complete what you can, and then submit it once done. I also just want to assure you that this is a long journey. It's not that we're going to expect this to be, reporting will start sometime next year as per our proposed rollout plan, but that's on a best effort basis. So we're going to walk the journey with you. The team is going to have discussions with you. There's going to be a plan about how can you get the data, how can you start reporting on it? So it's really best effort until we know that everyone in the industry is ready to do complete and full reporting. So we only expect that to be in 2026. So we have a 4-year period now for this rollout, and where we're going to really walk the journey with you. So also in the comments that we expect, we know that all the functionality is not in the return yet, and that is okay because we have a second round of consultation on functionality. We really want to talk about the contents, and we know that currently you're not reporting on all the contents, but we can explain why we expect you to have it, and we can walk the journey with you to get it and start that reporting. So I think that is what is important, because eventually we want to grow as authority on the data that we have and how we can use that to protect industry, but we also want you to grow as an entity and be stronger in how to protect your own interests and that of your members. So I think that is important. And as you saw, the strategy of the FSCA is also to make sure that we have financial education to our customers, that we have this inclusion and transformation process happening, that we protect our institutions, that we are that intrusive, that we are that proactive, that we are preemptive, and that this return is then forming part of that. Like I said, it's only one of the tools we're using, and it is to be on a more risk-based basis of supervision. And that is why proportionality is what plays a role here. And that is why this is a lighter version of a return versus some of the other entities, like I said. So I hope that kind of positions the return for you and the rollout, and maybe also then answers some of the concerns that you had and the worries about it being maybe a bit overwhelming, and you're worried about the extent of the data. And the feedback that we would appreciate is not that you don't have it, but that you understand what we're looking for, because there's not one question in here that we're not going to use and that we need, but rather than the feedback is maybe we can do it in a different way. Let's walk this journey together and see what can we ask then in a different way, where we can still get our indicator to protect the industry and you can still get the indicator to manage your business better. Thank you, Charene.
Juanita, thank you for that very good explanation. I think it helps a lot when people understand what it is that we're trying to achieve and how it is that we're trying to achieve it. Any meeting has a couple of house rules, so let's quickly just look at the house rules. So we would like to encourage your participation, and you can participate in one of two ways. You can type your question or your comment in the chat box, and I will then keep an eye on that and I will share that. And where needed, we will do our level best to respond to that comment. Or you can raise your hand, and we have Akashan who is running the admin for us. And when we see that you've raised your hand, we will give you an opportunity to speak. Akashan will then be unmuting your mic. In the interest of saving bandwidth, we're not going to necessarily enable everyone's cameras. but we will definitely give you a chance to speak. So Caution, I see that Sizwe is the brave person and is going to break the ice for us today. So could you please unmute Sizwe so that we can give Sizwe a chance to speak? Sizwe, your mic is unmuted, it's enabled. So can you please just click on the mic and then it is your chance to speak to us.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. I've got one question that I would like to ask in terms of, you mentioned something in terms of return. So in terms of the reporting line for the return, did you have the specific structure like that you prefer as a sector like FSCA? Because I know Reserve Bank, they've got their own structure for reporting.
Just lost sound. You're able to respond. So I just want to be sure that I understand, Sizwe, exactly what you were asking, because the sound was a bit soft. Are you asking in terms of, do we have a preference in the way that you submit the return? Or are you asking whether the return will end up in the right department, how we will deal with information of the return? I'm not quite sure when you say, you know, the Reserve Bank have their way of dealing with returns, where we have the same preference. I'm not sure that I understood that part.
Yes, actually, I was meaning the preference way that you use the, yeah.
The preference in submitting, is that what you're saying?
Yes, is what I was asking for.
Okay. So in terms of that, Sizwe, no, we have the two ways that you can submit. You can submit it with the XML codes, and you'll see on the roadmap where this consultation process is now taking place, where we specifically look at the contents of the return. Then we're going to take all the comments that we get from the workshops, that we get from the written comments. We're going to consult on that, maybe even have individual consultations if we don't really understand the comments, amend the CBR or the Omni CBR, then we're going to publish it again. Then the second round of consultation is going to start on the practicality of actually completing the return, submitting it, the timelines, whether it could be implemented the way we can. And then there's going to be a lot of work on how the functionality of the return works. And then the XML codes will also be final, although the ones for the questions that's staying here is the final XML ones. And then you as an entity can choose, do you want to build the XML way of submitting, which is very much the method also used by other entities like banks and big pension funds to draw information from. It's very automatic and there's no manual processes. But because we also realize that there are so many smaller entities, we'll have it web-based, and you can log on to the portal of the FSCA, and you'll see the entire return there, and you'll complete the numbers manually. We'll have a lot of validations, so you won't be able to submit something where there's, for instance, a cell not completed, or if something doesn't add up, and then when you're ready, you can submit it. So it doesn't matter to us whether you submit it with XML or whether you submit it web-based. It's just there's not going to be any physical submission of the return, and there's not going to be any Excel sheets uploaded anymore. You'll see on the web-based return, it's going to look exactly like it does now. So it looks like an Excel sheet, and you'll complete it there. It won't be your own Excel sheet, it will be ours, but you'll complete it there for the entities for which that's easier to do. But no, there's no preference. And then just to maybe also answer any possible other questions about it, that we ask it this way because all the information then goes to a BI database. And all the different departments and conduct of business supervision can access that database, can draw reports from it, can see where's the outliers, see where the flags are, where's the industry moving to, do we need to react to that, do we need to have discussions with certain entities. We'll do a comparison of the entity from the one quarter to the next quarter to the next quarter to see if there's a trend that we need to discuss. We'll do it in your peers. There will be some on specific products, especially Like you see, we have certain products here that we do that comparison, and that we'll also be able to give feedback to the industry too. And that's the benchmarking I was talking about. And then we can also look at the industry as a whole, because you're a smaller, more developing industry. There's not so many entities yet registered or working in your space. So I think the benchmarking part would be very important to you, and we need to do it on this automated way for us to be able to actually deal with all of that data and be able to give feedback timeously. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. No, thank you so much, and thank you so much.
I think you've just asked a whole lot of people questions and have the answer for that as well. Juanita, I don't see any comments or questions at this stage. Please, people, remember this is your session, and let's make it as interactive as possible. But if I can ask a question, and I know we've dealt with this in the webinars, but maybe not everyone has had a chance to look at the webinars. What is the difference between the all sheets and the specific sheets?
Okay, so Charene, basically, when you go to the company information sheet on the return, so the one that we published only has 4 sheets, because I've already gotten quite a few queries on this. There's only 4 sheets that you'll see. Sorry, I'm looking that way because it's on the screen. So then I can refer to it. So you have your introduction, you have your instructions, company information, and your terminology. So there's 5 sheets, and declaration. So that's the sheets that you have when on the one that was published. Then you go to the company information sheet, and you will choose the fact that you're a co-op there, and you'll say whether you have retail clients or business clients. And we do have a definition for that in the terminology sheet to tell you who you're dealing with. But basically, retail clients are natural persons, and any business that you deal with is a business client. So we didn't make the differentiation between corporate and commercial. All of them fall under business. And then we have the activity sheet. So the activities there are some of the activities that we know is in the COFI bill, and we're 99% sure they will stay there. So more activities can be added, and you'll say yes and no on those activities. And it's really just to get some information for us yet. It doesn't affect the customization of the return at all. It's gathering information for us, but also trying to get industry more aware of the terminology in the COFI bill and what we're using there and how we're dealing with it. Then you'll customize the return, which will take you as co-ops to the co-op product information sheet. There we split it between whether you're a cooperative bank or a cooperative financial institution, FI. And you'll then answer the questions yes or no, which type of products you actually provide, and you'll customize again. Then you'll see all the sheets that are applicable to your entity, and those are the sheets that we want you to comment on. So the all sheets, to get back to your question, Charene, is the sheets that we want all the entities that are reporting in the Omni CBR for us to complete. So every institution is going to get the all sheets. It's our basic line of information that we need. This we need for benchmarking purposes. This we need to actually see the full customer journey or the member journey. What is the cost involved? This is where we also see you as an entity, exactly the size of your book. Where are you getting your income from? How is your products performing? Are you really customer outcome based? Are you really looking at fair customers? Are you making it easy for customers or members to actually contact you, whether it's to claim, whether it's to complain, whether it's to close an account, whether it's queries on the account? Are you making it that accessible for them? We have questions that would be on the business composition all sheets that everyone will need to do. We have the movement of money sheets, where it's really about where is the money going? So in terms of what are you paying out, refunds and other payments that you get an instruction to close an account and you needed to pay it out, how quickly do you do that? Do you deal with or take the member out of the link? Do you deal with members differently? Do you deal with customers differently, depending on how important they are? So it's about the payments you make and how quickly you deal with that money, and also how do you collect your funds? Because that is quite a risky area. It's a risky area for you as an entity. It's a risky area for us as the FSCA. We need to understand, how do you collect? We know that some still collect a lot in cash. We know that you could have a bank account, one central bank account into which it collects. If you're a bank, we know that you could open different bank accounts. How do you collect the money? How do you keep it? Do other people collect it on your behalf and keep it and then pay it over to you? And what is the delay in that process before it can get allocated? So you need to make it really practical for yourself. There are some questions on the all sheet that won't be applicable to you, and that is okay, because you'll just put in a 0. Then we know that you considered the question, you just think about it, and it is not applicable to your business. There was a suggestion from our side and from a previous workshop also that some of the questions, if it's not applicable to you, should just fall away to make the sheets easier to complete and shorter and just, yeah, it'll save time and effort. The reason why we didn't do it at this stage, and it might be something else that you're going to ask about, is we've learned from the insurance CBR that you shouldn't assume. So there are certain things that maybe an entity isn't known to be doing or isn't supposed to be doing. And if we take that question away, the answer will not be there. Or that a certain product shouldn't have certain features, or we were not aware that a product had certain features. So until we don't ask the question and actually then see that it's really not applicable, no one is answering on this, then we can work on further customization of the return. But we shouldn't make assumptions from the beginning, because we were quite surprised with some of the information that we got from the industry. So on the all sheets, there are all of these type of questions. All the entities get it. Everyone needs to complete it. Everyone needs to submit it. And remember, after full implementation of this, it's still a living document. So it's not a volatile document that we will change every 6 months. It will go on for an annual review. Obviously, questions would need to change as industry change and as risks change. But for instance, then we could also make it that it's more user-friendly, that we take the questions away that we're not applicable, or gray it out for the area that it's not applicable to, if we're sure that it's not an assumption that we're working on. All of us come from industry. All of us worked in industry. And all of us have engagements with industry. So we're pretty sure we know what's going on, but we can still be surprised. And that is why we're not going to make that assumption at this stage. So that is the all sheets that you'll need to do. And then you have the business, composition additional sheet that is just for co-ops. And whether you're a co-op bank, or whether you are a financial institution, and the products that you gave, that is where a lot of that is going to come in, because that will then actually customize the columns for you, and you will provide the information for those columns.
Thank you, Juanita. That's a very good explanation. We have a question. We are being asked what kind of data will be required for business operations. So what kind of data will people need to have and access so that they can answer some of the questions? So maybe if we could look at the one of the business composition specific sheets and just give a sense of what kind of questions are being asked.
Thanks, Charene. So yeah, I can talk for days about the return. That's why Charene is having to give me a look every now and then to stop talking. But the type of questions that we have about your, and we did try to do a share function before, but that also interferes with the workshop. So I'm going to look at the return and just take you through some of the basic information. And like I said, I think the biggest adjustment is going to be, you know how big your book is, you know the value of your book of business. But we would want you to split it down, your target market for us on the retail side, like I said, into certain ages. So when we chose about what we're going to use for market segmentation on the retail side and on the business side, and we go into further detail on the business composition specific sheet for co-ops. On the retail side, we decided on age, because when we had to think of something that will work across the industry for all the entities in the industry that we want to complete, it has to be something that in terms of the POPIA Act, you don't have to ask information that you don't actually need or use. It has to be something that you don't have to go back on your existing book and get information on. And it has to be something that you can update on an ongoing basis as you have to complete the return without having to contact your customer or your member every time. And that is why we used age on the retail side, because that was the one thing we knew everyone had, because you need the ID number of someone. So it might take some work to actually split your target market into age groups, because you might just now sit with the ID numbers and you've never done that. But why it's also important is, again, where I referred to about the assumption that people need certain products at a certain age, that people have a certain level of understanding and knowledge at a certain age, and that you have to adapt your products and your way of distributing it and the way of collecting, especially collecting also your funds, that would actually work for that age. It's also interesting that when you see the other questions we're asking, this will also tell you whether there's a gap. Maybe that you can see that if you're selling to mostly younger people, or your accounts or the products that you're selling and the services that you're selling to, and your target market is more the young and upcoming, you obviously have to look at more digital ways of contacting them, whether it's SMSs, whether it's having a website. It depends on the size of your entity, but they like being contacted that way. If your target market is more the older age group, then you know they like seeing you personally, they know you like getting letters, they have a different way that they want to be communicated with. And that's also one of the questions that we ask, is how do you actually then distribute your products and your services? We also ask you whether your clients are male or female. The reason for that is that's a financial inclusion question that we're asking there. We need to report on financial literacy. We need to report on, in the industry, how many males and females take up the different products. It's also valuable information for you to see where there's a gap in that target market, where we need to concentrate maybe more on financial education from our side, and whether there's been a shift, because that's what we've seen with COVID. There's quite a shift in who actually takes up financial products and services. It used to be more male driven. But because so many females also that used to stay at home and be the caretakers had to go out and find more employment, more formal employment, they have been taking up a lot more financial products than in the past. And that is good information to have, to also see if the way that you're distributing and the products that you have actually works for them. Then also there are some questions that we have that is more concentrated on phase and your records of advice, and do you do your quality assurance on it, your key persons, the number of branches that you have. And because you're not doing a phase compliance report, but there's certain things that we still need to understand about your business. Do you have any extra insurance cover, any guarantees? What type of protection do you have? If you had to fall, how is your members or your customers protected? Those are the type of questions that we do ask you. And then we ask you about your product performance, because we want to know how many of your accounts went dormant within the first 3 months after selling it, how many actually then there was cancellations on, or there were disinvestments, and how many after 4 to 12 months did that happen, because that also shows you about mis-selling. It could show about some hard selling also happening, you know, some cultures. There is also a way of trying to force some of the older members into certain accounts. And if you have a lot of cancellations or disinvestments or dormant accounts, it shows you that maybe there's something wrong with a particular distribution channel you're using or the method that channel is using, and there's some training that needs to be given in that area. On your specific business composition sheet, we also ask you about breaking down your customers, except for the age and whether it's male or female, into salary bands. It's also to tell us more about the vulnerability of your target market and who you're catering for, and whether the products that you're offering is really suitable for them. We ask about fraud and fraud in your entity and whether there was fraud reporting. We do ask whether there's any possible conflict of interest. So those are the type of information. There's so many things actually that we're asking. We're asking about unauthorized accounts, which is very important information that you should also be having. And then you'll see we also have an entire sheet that just deals with complaints handling. And I know that maybe in your specific sector, you know, you get a complaint, you deal with a complaint, you go on, you don't necessarily record it. And now we're expecting you to record it and report on it. But there's valuable information in complaints because it shows you where there might be a gap in your service, a gap in your products, whether there is a certain distribution channel giving you problems that's causing you a loss. And that is a direct effect on your bottom line. But it also tells us, is there a concern in the business that we should be aware of? Can we assist you in trying to get over this obstacle? So that is going to be some work on your side, is actually recording all the complaints and putting it into the categories that we're asking. But that's why we're giving some time for the rollout. So Charene, that question was so wide. There's so many other things that I can say about it, but I think that basically gives the idea. Like I said, we want to know, you know, where your money is going, how you're collecting it. And on the conflict of interest sheet, there's a lot about what fees are you paying and what fees are you collecting? How regularly do your management change? Also, when we look at governance and at culture, staff changing and a high turnover in staff. And we know that some of you run your business and you actually, this is not your day job. There's something else that you're doing. And this is something additional that you're doing to that. But then also, how's that transfer of knowledge happening, and how actually do you do the bookkeeping then? Because there's a risk, there's a concentration risk there, there's a succession risk there, and we're trying to understand that through the questions. And that's why when you look at it the first time, it might look overwhelming and you might be thinking, but this is not applicable to us. But then you should start thinking about what is the risk that we're seeing that is applicable to your business. Anything can happen to anyone at any time. So that is what we need to look at. And maybe just the one thing that I didn't touch on is how we split the target market in the business side. So when it's not a natural person, I'm not sure really how many of those type of accounts we have in this space, but there we did it according to the annual turnover. And it was based on the fact that it didn't go with any other current legislation, but it was based on the fact that we know that certain legislation only protect to certain levels. We also know that you can have a sole proprietor, but that has a small turnover, and that would fall in the first category, or you can have a very big and strong sole proprietor. So you can't split it into sole proprietors and companies and things like that, because that wouldn't really tell you about the vulnerability of that person. And again, there's assumptions linked to that about knowledge and experience and skills and being able to negotiate and all of that. But that is what we used for that split. But like I said, I'm not so sure how big the business side would be in this specific sector.
Thank you, Juanita. That's a very comprehensive response. And I hope that for the person who raised the query that helps. We have a question from Paul Lawrence, and Lehlogonolo, I'm going to ask if you could perhaps respond to this one. So Paul is asking whether we can expand on the scope of cooperatives, and will this include all cooperatives who deal in financial products, such as being a credit provider? And he's assuming that farming cooperatives will be excluded. So Lehlogonolo, I'm not sure, would you be able to respond? It looks as if we have a sound problem. So, Jacky, I'm not sure. I know you have a problem with speaking, but could you perhaps type a response to Paul's question? Okay, thank you very much. I see we do have a response. So it applies to cooperative banks and cooperative financial institutions licensed in terms of the Cooperative Banks Act. The PA licenses and supervises cooperative banks and the cooperative financial institutions from a prudential perspective, whereas the FSCA does that from a conduct perspective. Jacky, thank you for that response. And saw that Sizwe had raised his hand. So a caution if we could perhaps give Sizwe access again.
Okay, thank you again. I've got just two questions that I just want to ask. The first question is that, as a sector, which role are you playing to ensure that the institutes are not failing in terms of compliance? It's the first question, that one. So the second question that I have, did you have the specific individually that we have to communicate with in terms of like our product? Like when, if let's say the institute have developed maybe other product, so we want to add our product so that we can able to know, to ensure that our product also on the database.
Thank you, Sizwe. Juanita.
Thanks, Charene. So Sizwe, your first question about, are we doing anything to, you see, there's some blonde streaks in the hair. You shouldn't ask so many questions at once, I forget what you're asking. So the first question about what we're doing to also ensure that entities aren't failing. This is one of the tools we want to use to try and assist and make sure, if we don't know what's going on in your business, and we don't understand what's going on in your business, it's very difficult for us to also assist you. And the guidance that we might give, remember, we don't tell you what to do. There's legislation that tells you what to do, but we can give guidance, and we can't give guidance if we don't know what's going on. We can also not know whether to change legislation in any way if we're not aware of what's happening in the industry. And from a market conduct perspective, we actually don't have a lot of information about your industry. And that's why we're very excited about this return and what we can get from the return, because you need customers and members to keep an entity going. And if we don't know that there's fair outcomes and we don't know where the gaps are and you don't know, then how are we going to ensure that works? And like I said, some prudential indicators that you have been reporting on are also market conduct indicators. They're linked. You can't remove them from each other. But we're asking it to a different level because there's different vulnerabilities here and there's different outcomes that we need to look at. So this return is for us one of the first big steps that we can then take to really assist you. We can never guarantee that an institution can't fail, neither can you. We can just all work together and try for that not to happen. That was your first question. In terms of products, so if you start offering another product, and Jacky will have to come in, I'm not so familiar with the licensing of co-ops and whether you need to be licensed to actually provide certain products, or whether your license opens you up for all 5 types of accounts that we're asking about. Because remember, we're not asking everything, we're asking what we're aware of. There are some vulnerabilities in the industry and there's some risks, and that's trying to make it more risk-based. Then you would change your return to actually cater then for the new product that you're offering, and then complete it that way. And if you already now see that there's a product in the industry being offered and we didn't include it in the return, that is a valuable comment that we need now. to actually then ensure that it is an option that you can choose from. But like I said, it's a living document, and as your business change, you would change your customization. So it wouldn't be that when you customize the first time, it's written in stone and you can't change thereafter. In terms of licensing for more products, that I'm not an expert on. I'm not sure if you have to be licensed for every single type of product that you provide. I don't know if Lehlogonolo or Jacky would probably type an answer for you on that one, but you can customize return to cater for that as you offer more products.
Thank you very much, Juanita. We have a question around linking of systems, and the question is, our current systems do not contain all the information you will be requiring, for instance, salary bands. Will you be providing software that will link with our current systems?
So thank you, Karen. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. It could be Karen, it could be Karen. I think it's Karen, for that question. So in our perfect dream world, for the FSCA, we would like to be on real data, and we would like to be linked to all systems of all entities and actually pull the information, and not that you have to push it now and then we get it and pull it. And there are some jurisdictions, very advanced jurisdictions, that are looking at that. It's obviously very costly. It's obviously very intensive. No one has done it successfully as far as I know, but there is that movement to try and link our systems to yours. I know some jurisdictions do link complaints. They have a central complaints database and they pull from there. I know in the UK, they do it for the outsourcing. They have a central system there and they pull the information from there that they need. But not across all their indicators and not pulling the entire return. So we would love that, but I don't think we're there yet. I think it's still very far away from that point. So no, we will not be providing any software. We won't be able to pull information from your systems. This will be system development on your side, just as much as we need to do system development on our side to be able to get all the returns and actually work through all the data. I mean, you can imagine we're going to have close to 12,000 entities submitting a return. So, and some entities are licensed as, let's say, an FSP and an insurer, or FSP and a bank. So we'll have to be able to pick up their information as on their different licenses and put that together. So we need to get a lot of sophisticated software. We've been working on this for a few years now, and how to pull those reports and get ourselves ready. And that's why we're very aware of the costs, and we're very aware of the time that you need to do it. But whether you do it through a system or whether you have to do it manually, depending on the size of your book, in the beginning, it is going to take some work and some development. I see that you're not currently asking about salary bands. That was one of the examples that you gave, but that is something that we feel you need to have, because the salary band will tell you whether the cost involved to this product that you're offering is actually in line to the target market that you're offering and selling it to. It will tell you whether it's appropriate or not. We would be able to do some benchmarking here. We can also then, from a financial inclusion point of view, see what salary band is actually going where and taking up what products, what is more appropriate for them. Also maybe taking up products, but then it's becoming dormant quite fast, or they're withdrawing from the one account and moving to the other account, and why is that happening? You wouldn't get that information just from age and saying, what is your gender? We do need to see that movement. We need to see whether when people move up in salary bands, do they then take more products? Do they take more products of the same products? Do they move to more sophisticated products? Or do they move away completely from co-ops and then go to a more structured banking sector and move their funds away there? Or do they stay and open accounts on the other side as well? Remember, because we're getting information from the banks and from the FSPs as well. So for us to really track the movement of what people are doing and what is motivating them, and also what the effects of certain things like COVID is on the industry and how we can prepare for it in the future, and how we can be more proactive with that, we do need that level of information. So, like I said, nothing that we're asking we're not going to use, and nothing that we're asking we're thinking that you're not going to have to use at a stage if you really want to advance your business, secure your business, and understand your target market, understand their concerns, their risks, because if them moving or them leaving is a risk for you. And knowing in which salary band they fall and then looking at that movement over time is really going to be valuable for you. So we do want you then to get that information, and that's why we're giving you a few years for the rollout of the Omni CBR.
Juanita, I see that Karen has responded and she said, thank you very much for your comprehensive response. I'm not seeing any hands at this stage. Now, really, people, I'm going to start picking on you and asking you questions if you don't ask us questions or give us some comments. Now, I won't do that really, but this is your opportunity to participate. And we would really like you to tell us what you like, what you don't like, what you're backing with. Maybe I should ask a question. Have everyone in the audience had a chance to look at the 3 webinars that we've recorded and is hosted on the FSCA's YouTube channel? We recorded 3 webinars a while ago, and the first webinar was really about what is the background to the Omni CBR, where is it coming from, what are the timelines. Juanita has given you a summary of the timelines, but we went into quite a bit of detail around the timelines and the expectations and how you as the industry can participate in this whole journey of the Omni CBR. Then in our second workshop, we went into the sheet that applies to everyone, regardless of what your license category is. So there's the 2 different types of sheets. Juanita's also explained that, where we look at things that applies to everyone, whether you're a cooperative bank, a cooperative financial institution, an FSP, a retirement fund, etc. And then in our third webinar, we unpack the specific sheets that only applies to your specific license category. I think one of the things that people must understand is that if you are an entity with multiple licenses, you are going to have to respond to each of the license type questions to us as well. And you're going to have to do it separately. You're not going to be able to do one return at this stage. Juanita, I'm not making a mistake. They are going to have to respond to each of those separately. I must just check my own understanding, because we work with this so often that it's actually easy for me to get confused and not remember what people have to do. Any questions at this stage? Remember, if we don't get questions, we're going to assume that you love the Omni CBR, that you can't wait to start participating and start completing, and that the questions really work for your environment. Juanita.
Thanks, Charene. Lehlogonolo, I don't know from your side, from the team side, supervising this specific industry, if there's any specific thing that you would like to raise or maybe give clarity on that you think might be needed. I think that what I already said in terms of what we're going to expect in terms of information and the level of information and the reasoning behind that is so. And that we actually have all of that, and that we're going to need all of that. I also know that some of the questions that we asked, I'm thinking about other questions that were asked in other workshops. The questions we're asking on the governance sheet, for instance, where we have a governance section and a culture section, is really more the straightforward type of questions. It's about looking at compliance, because the return also tells us about compliance. We need to have some internal checks as well, just to be sure that things that you were supposed to report to us, things of changes has actually happened. In terms of governance, you can have all the policies in place, but actually, like I said, the movement of staff, for instance, is a strong indicator for us. We look at if you're using systems, how many systems are you using, your exposure to more systems, more outsourced partners, more people collecting for you does raise your risk. At the end of the day, every entity that we supervise, we do give a risk rating to. It's not just dependent on the return. The return does feed into that. But there's other engagements that we have with other authorities that would influence that, and also the engagements we have with you. And I know the team also did a few on-sites, and they came to visit some of the institutions so we can understand the business better. And all of that would feed into your risk rating. So some of the questions are just straightforward in terms of governance and also in terms of culture, because culture is one of the buzzwords everyone is looking at and trying to see how is the entity really treating a customer? Is there fair outcomes? Is it really just about the entity? Is it just about the bottom line? Or is it about your members and really providing security to your members, really being there for your members? And the culture questions on that sheet is also more straightforward type of culture questions. Obviously, how you deal with their payments, how you deal with their queries, how quickly you do that, how efficient you are, because you'll see some of the questions that we ask, especially when it's about a turnaround time, how fast do you resolve things, also shows us about the efficiency of the process that you have in place. And again, we do realize that some of these questions, especially when we look at these type of cultural questions, when we look at the complaints questions, that might be very difficult for you to answer at this stage, and it's something that's going to need to happen from scratch. We're not going to go and ask you about data in the past. We're looking forward, and we're asking about data going forward on your existing book and forward. So yes, certain data on your existing book you need to get in, but like complaints and trying to get that data and building that register, that is going forward. If I think of the queries that we had in some of the other workshops.
Thank you, Juanita. Karen just asked whether we can send out a document listing the details we will need or they will need to have on their systems to make completing the forms easier.
So Karen, I think when you look at the return and you see what we're asking, so we don't have a document. You'll see in the roadmap that we published, the second half of it also goes about the different sheets and what we want on the different sheets and what we're looking at and what was the thinking behind it. So that gives you an idea. And then if you actually look at the questions on the return, and that's why I'm saying we did publish the return. The return is just not customized as it's published. We had the choice of publishing the return with all the tabs, but then there would be more than 100 tabs. And I think that would have caused more confusion and chaos and hysteria in the industry. And it would have been more difficult for you to find the actual sheets you need to comment on. So the questions we have on the sheets now is the data that we expect from you. That is where we are now in our thinking, and that is the systems will need to cater for that level of data. Where something is not applicable, again, you'll put in a 0. And that's what you need to comment on now. We won't have a list of saying what your system needs to do, but your system needs to be able to complete that return. And this is phase 1. Of that consultation process to look at those questions and look at what we're asking. Phase 2 will be how do we implement it. So we expect that there might be changes to the questions based on the comments that we're getting. And if I think of the previous workshops we had, there might even be, they gave us ideas for more questions, not less questions, that we would consider, but also with the comments. So it's important that you give your comments by 10 August, and that is on our portal. You'll see in the documentation also we explain that you go to the e-services section, and that there's a comments portal, and that you actually there complete your comments. You can go in and out and in and out, and it's for the different sections. So you only have to complete the ones that you want to complete on and then submit it. And we'll consider that for the questions and changing the questions. But this does give you an idea of the information that we want.
Thank you, Juanita. Jacky has responded to the question about the product approval from CSWE earlier, and she says that her understanding is that the PA licenses cooperatives for products for which they qualify. From a conduct supervision perspective, the FSCA applies the conduct standard for banks in respect of cooperative banks, and for cooperative financial institutions, the draft conduct standard has been workshopped with the cooperative financial institutions. Thank you, Jacky. Lehlogonolo, you have your hand raised. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Charene. I'm not sure if you can hear me now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I think Jacky has touched on the issue that I wanted to address, but just in addition, can maybe Juanita also just expand in terms of the frequency of the reporting so that the cooperatives understand how often they will be required to submit the Omni CBR for assessment? Thanks.
Thanks, Lehlogonolo. Okay, so in the beginning now, after we've done all the consultation and we actually send out the final Omni CBR, which we expect would be around maybe September next year, there is going to be a phasing period, of which we think at this stage it will be 2 years. And in that phasing period, that is the period that I spoke about, where it will be a best effort basis. Although you'll already now have an idea of what the questions are, and you already now have an idea of what data you have to start getting together. But you'll have a more definite idea after we publish the updated one in December, because then it's about implementation thereafter. So the content you'll have. So in effect, you'll have 3 years to start getting the data ready and start building the systems and start doing, you know, what you need to do to be able to complete it. In that phasing period, there is a possibility, and this is something we can still consult on the implementation side when we do the second round of consultation, that we will probably ask you to submit the first 2 or 3 returns on a biannual basis, because we know you have to work on systems, and to do it on a quarterly basis might be very difficult, but it also depends on the sector. For instance, the insurance sector is already used to doing quarterly reporting. They now have a return that goes into a bit more detail for them, but they would probably continue with quarterly reporting because that's what they're doing, and then they'll have a best effort basis for the information that we've added for them to complete on. They might also have a shorter phasing period because it's just some additional detail that we're asking them. For other industries like yourself and even banks, because this is a whole new return for them as well. They haven't done a conduct of business return. So you're not alone. Neither has the investment providers or the asset managers. None of them have done a conduct of business return. The pension funds, the 13B administrators. So there we would probably have it on a biannual basis, like I said, for the first 2 or 3 returns, and then we're going to start getting you into the rhythm of quarterly returns. So this return, ideally, when it's implemented in full, we would want it to be on a calendar quarter. So you will submit it within a month after the end of the calendar quarter. So it's 3-month periods that you're reporting on, which also makes it for the entities that have to work on a more manual basis, I think, easier, because it's not so much data that you have to pull together and put together, and especially if you're going to manually complete the return. Then it's not that much that you need to actually be able to compile to be able to submit it, but that's only in 2026 and going forward. So that's not at this stage, and you won't be submitting a return at this stage. Now we just want you to look at the return and give us comments on the contents of the return. But that is what we're looking at. Eventually, we are going to look at an annual report. And that would be more a qualitative type of report, where this is quantitative, this is numbers, this is something that you should be able to generate easily. And it is something that you, on most of the questions, should be able to be looking at on a monthly basis for your own business. So that is why we believe that this one would be on a quarterly basis. And it's important because the type of data that we're asking, like size of your book and your complaints and the trends that we can pick up of that, that's the type of things that are volatile enough to ask on a quarterly basis if you really want to be proactive.
Thank you, Juanita. Lehlogonolo, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Charene. And thanks, Juanita. I think you touched on one of the points that I wanted to raise as well, in terms of managing the expectations, just to say that, you know, the return is more of a quantitative report. So meaning that it would have to be completed using numbers as opposed to, you know, words. And also maybe, Juanita, if you can expand on what would happen if they need to provide more information based on the numbers that they have provided. I know that this is something that will be touched on as we have more consultations on the CBR, but I think just so that, you know, the industry is aware and clear on what is expected from a reporting and data gathering perspective. Maybe if you can just elaborate a little bit in terms of how the information should be input into the CBR. Thanks.
Thanks, Lehlogonolo. So, like I said, there's two ways of doing it. You can use the XML code to submit it, where it pulls it automatically from your system and submits it to us through a switch. That is a more sophisticated way of doing it. The bigger entities might have those systems. It's kind of the same way that your spreadsheets and switching with the banks work, and when you work on debit orders and those type of things where the information gets pulled. Or it will be that you will physically go to our portal and you'll go to where the return is, and it's web-based, so it looks like this. It looks like an Excel sheet. You'll customize it there and you'll manually complete it. And like I said, you can be able to go in and out until you're ready, that you have all the information completed and that you can submit. If you've made mistakes on it that some of our validation rules will pick up, then it will actually throw out the error for you. You won't be able to submit, or if you leave any of the cells open, you won't be able to submit. It's the same as on the XML side. And then you'll have the opportunity to actually correct it and submit it thereafter. So like I said previously, there's no physical submission of anything. There's no uploading of Excel sheets, because that's how we're currently doing it with the insurers. And that then causes us it's a delay in analyzing the information, and it causes us not to have so many validation rules to also assist with the quality of the information that we're getting. And that's why we're moving to this way of submitting.
Thank you, Juanita. I see that CISPA has asked a practical question. I think that relates to their current certification. If I could ask someone in the micro institutions department to perhaps just respond to him, maybe in the chat box. I don't see any other questions at this stage, or any other hands that are raised. One of the things that is important to remember about the Omni CBR, it's not an event, it's a journey that we are embarking on, and it's a journey that we will be on together. So there's a whole lot of different steps that we have to complete, and the first step of that is what we're busy with right now, is where everyone is having a chance to consider the draft questions and to start thinking about the practical implications for you in your business. What will you have to put in place in order to respond to the questions? Can you pull the data? Can you then collate the data in such a way that you can respond to the various questions? Are there perhaps a different way of phrasing the question that would make it a little bit more manageable for you? But also what is important is how are you going to use this information? Because by responding to the Omni CBR questions, you're actually going to be sitting with a ton of information, management information about your business and your client base. How valuable is that information going to be to your operations and your strategic decisions and your operational decisions going forward? It's no use having all of this information and you don't use it. As the regulator, we have a very good sense of why we're asking the questions and what we intend to do with the information. And that's also what we went into quite a bit of detail into the webinars that I've discussed earlier. And Juanita has also expanded on that a lot in her discussions already today. But I want you to start thinking as a business, how are you going to use this information? What are you going to do with it? And how is it going to influence your journey in the future? As Juanita has said, it's a fairly lengthy timeline that we're looking at. She just mentioned 2026, and I mean, we're sitting in 2022. So we're talking years in the future. For me, 2026 feels quite far away, but from a practical implementation perspective, that's around the corner, because a lot of steps that we have to plan for to get to that end point. Lehlogonolo.
Thank you, Charene. I think I just want to respond to Caesar's question with regards to the issuing of the certificates. So I think, as Jacky mentioned in her chat, the cooperative banks and the CFIs are licensed by the PA in terms of the Cooperative Banks Act. So therefore, a licensing certificate would be issued by the PA in that regard. And if maybe, for instance, they want to become an FSP, meaning a financial services provider in terms of the FACE Act, then they would apply at the FSCA, whereby a certificate would be issued from a FACE perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Lehlogonolo. That's a very clear answer. Sizwe, I hope that that has responded to your question. Any other comments, any other questions at this stage? As Juanita has mentioned, the comment process will close on the 10th of August. So you have an opportunity to use the link on the FSCA website and to respond to us in writing. All of the comments will be considered. As with any consultation process, we are probably going to have people who really like a specific question, really like what we're trying to achieve with it. And on the same question, we might have some people who have different opinions and different suggestions. We will do our best to balance it and to come up with questions that at the end of the day is going to serve both the needs of the industry as well as the needs of the regulator. There will also be feedback back to you on the comments that we receive, and that's part of the timeline that we've also mentioned already. And the timeline is discussed in detail in the first webinar, and you would have seen that the links to the webinars are posted in the chat box as well. Any other issues that our colleagues in the micro institutions would like to raise or just remind you about, to focus your attention on?
Charene, I think just a comment from my side. I think maybe the business composition sheet and the sector specific sheet, as it is, I think the headings there are quite self-explanatory in terms of what we would be looking at, because they touch on third-party agreements, you know, your business composition as a whole, your claims management processes. And I think based on those headings, we would have a clear indication of what are the conduct issues that are facing the industry, so that we can also do an assessment on our side, just to look at the different trends amongst the different types of institutions, being a cooperative bank or a CFI. So I think the themes there should sort of like give a guideline to the industry as to what we would be looking out for from a conduct perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Lehlogonolo. It seems as if we've dealt with all of the questions and comments that people had for this session. So thank you so much for your participation. We really appreciate the fact that you've taken time out of your busy diaries. Juanita, any last comments from your side before we close?
Thank you, Charene, and thank you, everyone. Yes, this was a very nice and calm workshop. But again, also remember, even before your comments are due on the 10th of August, you're more than welcome to contact us after you've maybe had some time to look at the questions and consider it and have discussions with us. So you're welcome to contact Lehlogonolo or myself and ask for a virtual engagement or in-person engagement. We mostly do virtual engagement still, so that we can talk through some of the questions and maybe our thinking and understanding before you comment. You're more than welcome to do that. But thank you for attending the workshop and thank you for participating. And yes, like I said, let's go open-minded into it and let's work on this together as partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita, and thank you to all the colleagues who attended today and to the industry. We really appreciate your participation. So we did have a question about the availability of the recording. We are, if bandwidth allows, because some of the sessions were quite big, we are planning to host the sessions on the FSCA YouTube channel at the end of the workshops. We have done 3 workshops and we have 4 to go. I see we have a last comment from Sizwe. Sizwe, you can go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Right. I would like to have a direct communication with any of the directors or
Yeah.
Sizwe, so could I ask that you perhaps send us an email? You can send it to, so you're asking for a session just with you. So if that's what you're asking for, okay, then please send us an email and then we will be in contact with you and we will set up the session. Then thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. We really appreciate it. All the best and have a good day further. Thank you. Bye-bye.